be milder in this video, more like the more soft purring racing cars that don't win races but just keep everybody entertained, get in the way sometimes of those that want to win, but yeah, keep the show on the road. And this video is really an appeal to my brother Garth, because he's my brother all said and done, and part of the Christie family, believe it or not. I think people have always said they were as different as chalk and cheese, but I think the fact that the Hales entities have been raided should make him sit up and think, well, has doing everything that Bruce Hales has told me to do really been the best and fairest for Lance? The fact is that I have submitted an invoice to Garth on the 15th of April last year, which came as a result of open discussion in front of the Christie family and contributions from the Christie family, not only those inside, but those who have been excommunicated too, and others who had nothing to do with the brethren apart from knowing that their ancestors had been involved. So it was a wonderful opportunity to spill my soul to the family, and I think the family is a more precious institution than a religion. And they calmly came to the conclusion that I should invoice Garth for the expenses I've had to incur in defending myself, including the legal expenses, pure invoiced legal expenses of £1.6 million. So the figure of £2.5 million was arrived at after sensible discussion, copied into Garth, Neil, Jed, Josh, and so the invoice number 0143 reads as follows: to meet Garth A. Christie's righteous obligation to pay legal and affiliated costs that Lance has incurred in defending himself from legal attacks against him from Garth. This amount of £2.5 million includes all outstanding interest and is the expense figure arrived at as a result of evidence being provided to the Christie family, who agree to the amount. Payment should be made to Lance J. Christie, bank account number, sort code number, terms of payment 30 days net. Interest will be charged at 2% per month if payment is delayed. So Garth has been delaying. It's now, we're now into April, aren't we? So it's now almost a year. So I think that's fair. Garth has ignored this, like he's ignored my pleas for years, like he's ignored letters I've written, in fact, taken legal cases against me for writing letters of truth, appealing for fairness and justice, which came out in the court when I was acquitted of harassing the brethren. So in view of all these attacks on my integrity, vicious legal attacks, which I can remember 11, I've won them all. The last one was a bit of a truce, but basically the judge I should get on and reform the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, which I'm trying to do in a fair way, in a way that commands the respect of the inside brethren, and they should reform themselves. It's not my job exactly, apart from to make sure that they've got the truth, so that they're actually asking questions and fighting the battles of the Lord with evidence behind them, in fact. And one thing about me, I might be a bit of a rugged Yorkshireman, as a description of Mike Hughes, who I thought was a friend of mine until he turned against me back in the day. I might be, and I might not be as nice and dovey as some would hope me to be, but I do tell the truth And I do ask questions if I don't understand what's going on. And the brethren do not encourage that, to put it mildly. So this is so my lawyers have written to Garth in a very genuine attempt to bring in some solution to this matter. And it's basically adds up to this. Lance is saying, pay off all his legal fees, historic and current, plus the interest he's had to incur, and he gave a loan to the brethren of 1.425 million when he was in the brethren for Bramham Park Hall in 2008. He's never received a cent of interest for that, and he was paid back by Branbury Education Trust in December 2016. Bruce Hales said he should be paid interest. So that's all swept up into this. And then what's happened to Lance should never have happened. Bruce Hales should never have misconstrued the facts. Lance was advocating for various people in the UK for genuine reasons. And you should see, Garth, that this should never have happened to your brother. So it'll help your cause if you pay that off now. And, you know, we're saying, Garth, you did it under Hales's instruction. Hales is now being investigated by the authorities in New South Wales. Are you going to just stand up for Hales regardless of truth, regardless of evidence, regardless of anything Lance says? Or are you just going to, hey, brother Lance, I've got it wrong, mate. Yeah, it's only fair that I pay you back the expenses you've had to incur because of what I've done to you. Simple as that. And Garth read out the letter. He was the man that read out the letter that I went over in the last video that Bruce Hales sent to me at Boston. So let me just read a little bit out from the letter from Gordon's LLP of Leeds, my lawyers, to Garth. We write to you, this was in December this year. We write to you, last year, sorry. We write to you following correspondence sent to you by Lance and other members of the Christie family over the course of the last 8 months. This letter is not a threat to pursue civil proceedings or any other legal process and should not be perceived as such. Indeed, we can confirm that Lance has no intention of pursuing any legal claim or instigating any other judicial process against you in relation to the subject matter of this recent correspondence. Our involvement as solicitors is simply to assist Lance in communicating his views in a manner which is clear, unambiguous and understandable. At the heart of the recent correspondence is a request on Lance's part for you to pay a sum of £2.5 million to him, the request. The figure in the request has been calculated by Lance to represent the money which he considers he has lost or been forced to spend since 2017 in dealing with legal challenges, claims and threats to pursue claims which he has received from people and entities connected to the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, the PBCC or the Brethren. As referred to above, the request is not made on the basis of any legal obligation, but rather it is based on a moral obligation, which Lance believes that you owe, which in turn is supported by fundamental Christian values and principles, which themselves are derived from Scripture. We address the issues of the moral obligation below. Background. In October 2014, Lance received a letter from the leader of the PBCC, Bruce Hales, the Hales letter. It referred to efforts which Lance had made to help 2 members of the Brethren, one of whom was in prison and suffering with depression, and the other was being bullied by his father. In the letter, Mr. Hales indicated that Lance's efforts to help were in some way offensive to him and showed personal disregard for his own feelings, particularly as Mr. Hales seemed to believe that Lance had acted independently when Lance had in fact worked with Brethren members local to the 2 members who he had sought to help. Lance was shocked and devastated to receive the Hales letter, not least as 1, he was a committed and devoted member of the Brethren and had raised his children as such, and 2, he did not believe that he had done anything wrong. Mr. Hales told Lance he must be submissive and accept what he said or face consequences. But Lance found it impossible to do so, not least as Mr. Hales had not explained what feelings Lance had offended and how he had done so. Arising out of his inability to accept Mr. Hales's judgment from 2014 until 2016, Lance was disciplined at the instigation of you and the other senior elders of the Horsforth Gospel Hall Trust, including receiving 27 priestly visits and 3 full congregational public rebukes. Lance was shut up by you and Roger Edwards on the 17th of March 2017 and ordered to leave his family home. This was the last occasion he saw many members of his immediate family he was withdrawn from in October 2017. Lance asked Roger Edwards in October 17 to convey to the Leeds Assembly that he didn't accept this judgment upon which the excommunication had been based, namely that he'd been unfaithful to his wife and had gone in for the world in the fullest sense. From March 17, Lance has been the subject of numerous claims, threats of claims, and legal actions and processes instigated by people within and entities controlled by the PBCC. He was also forced to fight with his family in relation to his interest in the family business Weavable. This has personally cost in excess of 1.5 million in legal fees and has left him without connection to the business, his former community, and those members of his family who remain PBCC adherents. And then, under the heading, the obligation. As well as being Lance's brother, you are the most senior elder in the Horsforth Gospel Hall and have held this role for the entirety of the period relevant to the events referred to above. Lance holds you responsible for much of what has happened to him over the course of the last 9 years. This is based on your initial failure to protect Lance after receiving the Hales letter, followed then by the part you played in the assembly discipline received by Lance up to and including his withdrawal and the events which followed thereafter. It will have been clear to you that A, Lance did not accept Mr. Hales's judgment, as referred to in the Hales letter, and B, the judgment was clearly wrong, particularly in circumstances when Lance's actions were genuine and well-intentioned efforts to help. Despite this, you did not intervene on Lance's behalf. On the contrary, you instigated many of the disciplinary measures received by Lance, leading up to and including the shutting up and Lance's excommunication. In terms of the events following Lance's excommunication, Lance has a strong belief that you were involved in all of the claims, threats of claims and actions that followed. And then my lawyer goes over the different actions, the last one being your son Neil supported the prosecution of Lance for alleged harassment and reported Lance for breach of his bail conditions, resulting in Lance being imprisoned overnight. And then various scriptures illustrating fundamental Christian values are quoted by my lawyer, namely Luke 6, 27 to 30, Matthew 18, 21 to 22, Matthew 5, 25, Luke 12, 57 to 59, 1 Corinthians 6, 1 to 8, 1 Timothy 2, verses 2 to 5, 2 Timothy 2, verse 24 and 25, Galatians 6, verse 1, 1 John 1, verse 9, and he goes on to say these are just few of many Bible texts that could be quoted, which Lance believes are seen by most Christians as characteristic of the Spirit of Jesus and of the New Testament message of grace. I love this whole subject of grace, and the brethren knew I did. There's grace for every situation. We don't need to judge people. Sorry, I keep going aside. I think I've been pretty focused on this one for me. Furthermore, these texts concern attitudes even to perceived opponents or offenders. So if someone offends you, Scripture makes it very clear how you go about it. You don't punish them. Matthew 18 is a wonderful scripture. Go and see him between thee and him alone. Generally, 95% of cases, if you've got the guts to do that, reconciliation comes about. Wonderful scripture. You don't go to the legal system until you've tried to reach a happy conclusion sensible, fair, righteous conclusion outside the courts. And then it just goes on. My lawyers, having known me for a while, state Lance was not fond of money, as mentioned 1 Timothy 3 verse 3. I don't think I'd have put my money where my mouth is and put it into an arena standing for justice. If I was fond of money, I'd have just gone off and squandered it on myself, which is not fulfilling to my moral agenda, you might say. You know, we all like to enjoy ourselves, like a bit of fun. Certainly, I'm the first for that, but not when there's outstanding issues that need addressing. I can't just go and lay on a beach and enjoy the sun as though nothing's happening when there's people with outstanding issues like this. I like to resolve everything. I think everything is utterly resolvable. And then he goes on, Lance does not accept that he's a heretic and believes that everything could have been settled on the basis of Galatians 6 verse 1 and 1 John 1 verse 9. So I'm not saying that I'm any good. I'm just saying there are scriptures that could have been used to deal with me, a sinner saved by grace. Forgiven, I knew I was forgiven, a forgiven sinner when the priests were interrogating me. But, and I don't think I ever got aggressive, but I stand judged. Oh yeah, I was harassing the priesthood apparently. So they make these judgments when it's 3 against 1, of course, 5 against 1 when Lee Armstrong and Clive Anderson joined them on one occasion. It's very difficult to say anything in self-defense because you're immediately judged as being as not accepting the authority and final word of the man of God. So it's not easy to, but I tried to keep a calm spirit by focusing on Jesus and how he was when he was under the greatest of attacks that will never be matched in history ever again, the most vicious of attacks. So he's been my inspiration the whole through actually, and so I trust that there'll be a fresh reaching out to Christ through all this. Although I need my money to do what I need to do from Garth, I am getting by just about with the help of kind people who empathise with me. But as I've said previously, I'm down to my last few pounds, 40 quid in my account now. I've managed to get a bit back up to that. But I owe people money, and I think it would be right. But people, lovely people who aren't actually bringing me under great pressure to pay it back. But I will pay them back and want to pay them back. But I need the brethren to be righteous too and pay back what they've caused me to pay. It's very simple. And, you know, my lawyers have just left it with Garth. If Garth says at this stage he'd rather just pay the sheer legal fees of between 1.5 and 1.6 million, I think I can substantiate with invoices 1.6, and none of the expenses that go with it, and the secretarial expenses and all the other expenses which I've genuinely had to employ. Well, that will be a start. We can knock that off the £2.5 million invoice and leave the rest outstanding until he realises he should pay that as well. But, you know, I'm fairly relaxed. I was never a hard taskmaster in the brethren. It always grieved me when brethren were withdrawn from, so I was begrudging in my acceptance of that. I was terribly hurt and upset when my father was withdrawn from my dear mother back in September 72, but then the word of the man of God is final, and if he says that my father's bad, he's bad. If Garth says now I'm so bad that I deserve to lose my family, which was worth £10 million before Garth started on us and engaged in a divide and destroy tactic. Now I'm down to my house, my business premises, which I'm having to sell to try and meet these debts. You know, it's a pity. I think Garth should think about setting me up. Maybe Bruce Hale should think about setting me up. I've suggested that, you know, he might provide me an industrial estate in Sydney somewhere, so that I can set up a business and start consulting, so that brethren businesses are put into family control. That's a perfectly honourable desire, and rather than being in the control of a religion, because I think business and religion is a toxic mix, and I think UBT after investigation will have to change its format without any shadow of a doubt, and not be so overarching over brethren members' lives and brethren's businesses and brethren's money. It's quite simple, so we need to make sure the money is in individual family control, and that will weaken the hierarchy and the control of the hierarchy of the religion, and bring people back to basics and have to make ends meet, and not get people into situations where their wills and their loans are all in the hands of the church. Thank you.